Hi everyone, and welcome to TechOptic. Adding the Active Directory role to a server is quite easy and only takes a few minutes. However, transforming that server into a secure and scalable domain controller architecture that will operate with minimal issues for years requires an entirely different level of expertise. In this video, rather than just rushing through the installation wizard for a standard setup, we are going to build our system based on enterprise standards from the very beginning. We will cover everything from proper domain naming strategies to NTDS database disisolation, and finally, how to activate the new 32K database architecture introduced in Server 2025, applying field-tested best practices step by step. If you're ready, let's get started. Before jumping into the configuration, let's quickly look at the hardware settings. For the CPU, we gave 4 cores, and for the disk, we created 3 separate disks. One for the operating system, and the other ones are for the Active Directory. For the memory, we gave 4 GB of it, and for the network, 1 GB will be sufficient. Let's jump on the configuration. First of all, we need to make sure the server has an appropriate name. To do that, right-click the Start menu and click the System. After that, rename this PC with an appropriate name. And click Next. We need to restart the server to make these settings effective. Let's log in again. And second part will be the assigning the static IP address. Active Directory must have a static IP address to work flawlessly. To make this happen, click the Start menu and type Control Panel. Click it. Go to the Network and Sharing Center. Click Change Adapter Settings. Double-click the Network Interface card and click Properties. And then double-click the Internet Protocol version 4. Here, check to use the following IP address and give an appropriate IP address. For the DNS server, we need to make sure to point itself because it is our first domain controller. And for the alternate DNS server, as acting a backup DNS server, we are still giving the loopback IP address, which points itself. But keep in mind that when you're in a production environment, you shouldn't have a single domain controller. You should have at least 1 or 2 additional domain controllers to back up themselves. When in this configuration, using the DNS server settings like here is not effective and it can lead many problems. So to make this configuration right, you need to make sure to point other DNS server's IP address. Why are we doing this? Let me explain it over a simple drawing. Let's say we have a domain controller here, named DC1. And there will be another domain controller here, which acts as an additional domain controller. Let's call it ADC. As you know, we gave an IP address here and pointed itself as for the preferred DNS, which was 172.16.10 and 10. When there is ADC in the environment, we shouldn't give this IP address to point themselves. It should be the IP address of the other domain controllers. Let's say the ADC's IP address is 172.16.10 and 20. And we need to make sure cross-mapping for these domain controllers. Why are we doing this? If we give the DNS names point themselves And when the domain controllers reboot, there's a chance that the DNS server may not be up. And when it happens, the Active Directory will wait the domain naming system, and the DNS also will wait the Active Directory, which creates some kind of, again, chicken problem. So we call it in the terminology a DNS island. So to prevent this happening, we need to give 10.20 for the DC1's preferred DNS. And for the ADC, we need to specify 10.10 for the preferred DNS. The second ones can keep the same, which is the loopback IP address. If you do that, since the other domain controllers will be up and online, it will not create any issues or delay for the Active Directory, which is fine for us. So make sure change the preferred DNS names between each other, and with this configuration there will be no issues when booting up the server. Let's jump back on the configuration. Let's save it. I believe we misconfigured the default gateway. Let's click it no, and let's change it to 10 and save it. Okay. The next configuration will be this separation. As you remember, we created separated disks for the Active Directory. Let's configure them. Right-click the Start menu and click Computer Management. Click the Disk Management. It says we have to initialize the disk. Let's click OK. For the 30 gigabytes of disks, we need to create a simple volume. Click Next. Next. Let's call it N as letter. And for the volume label, type NTDS. Make sure the Perform a Quick format is checked and click Next and Finish. For the second disk, we will make the same settings, slightly changing them. Click Next, click Next. For the drive letter, let's call it L. And for the volume label, let's type it Locks and click Finish. Okay, we can close it here, and let's jump into the installation of the domain controller. To do that, click the Start menu and click the Server Manager. We can close these windows here. On the right upper section, click the Manage and click Add Roles and Features. Click Next. Make sure role-based or feature-based installation is selected. Click Next. Since this is our only server and we need to install the domain controller on this one, just click Next. On the server roles section, make sure you click the Active Directory domain services and click Add Features coming along with them. And also, we need to install the DNS server. We need to check it as well. Click Next. For the features, we don't need to add anything, so we can continue and click again. Again, it shows us some information about the domain naming systems here. We can click Next and click Install. The installation is finished, but our job isn't. Let's close this and click the yellow warning in the notifications and click Promote this server to a domain controller from the open window. Here, we can add a domain controller to an existing domain, or add a new domain to an existing forest, or add a new forest. Since this is our first server, we need to make sure add a new forest. For the root domain, type your domain. I'm going to type ad.techuptic.com. So why are we using this naming? Domain naming is the most critical point here. Using old school non-routable extensions like .local or maybe .main is strictly discouraged by Microsoft. First of all, as you know, we cannot get any SSL certificates from global CAs. If you have a domain name ending like .net, .com.tr or .com, please make sure that keep this rule here. Additionally, as you may recognize, we also added a prefix before the domain name as AD. Why are we doing this? We are doing this because if you do just techuptic.com or techuptic.net, you will create a split brain DNS scenario. Actually, your internal AD will think it owns the entire domain. And when employees try to reach your external websites, for example, www.techuptic.com, they will get errors for it. The best practice is to use a subdomain like we do here. We will use ad.techuptic.com instead of techuptic.com. This keeps our internal traffic isolated while ensuring flawless cloud integrations later on if needed. Let's click Next. For the functional level, please make sure for both forest and domain functional level as recent as possible. Since we are going to configure 32K page size in our environment, and since this is the most recent one, we are going to use the Windows Server 2025. We don't need to change anything here. And for the directory services restore mode, we need to make sure give a strong password and keep it that way. This service, DSRM, is actually acting like the safe mode for the Windows. So when we need to restore database using NT backup, for example, or when we want to troubleshoot some issues, for example, if we need to log in with safe mode, we can use directory services restore mode. So in this mode, this password will be applied. So please make sure that keep it safe and keep it strong. And click Next. We can continue as clicking Next. The NetBIOS name actually acts for compatible with the previous versions of the Active Directory system. So the AD is fine for us and we don't need to change anything. Click Next. And here we need to separate these directories for the best performance. As you remember, we created 3 different disks. One of them was for the NTDS and the other one was for the logs. So NTDS database reads and writes data on the disks randomly, while the logs just writes the data sequentially. So if we traditionally keep it in a single disk or partition, it can create bottlenecks on the disk. So it's a best practice that to separate them onto 2 disks. Let's go to the NTDS disk and create a folder named NTDS data for the N. And for the logs, let's create another folder named NTDS logs. Let's copy the directory path and apply it accordingly. For the log file folder section, we are changing it like here. For the NTDS, let's copy the directory and change the database folder here. For this folder, since it will not create heavy read and write operations on the disk, we can keep it on the C drive without a problem. Let's click Next. It says we can review our selections. We already configured it and we can click Next. Right now, the system will check the prerequisites and these should be validated before installation and configuration. It says all prerequisite checks passed successfully. Click Install to begin installation. Since we haven't had any DNS server and it will be created after it, we can simply ignore it. Let's click Install. After that, the system will restart itself and the installation and configuration part for the Active Directory be completed. But we still have some configurations to do to make them better. Right now, we are going to configure the DNS for the reverse DNS zone. To do that, click to start, type DNS to search, and open DNS. While forward zones resolves names to IP addresses, creating a reverse DNS zone resolve IPs is highly recommended in corporate environments, especially for firewall log readability and also the email server validations. So to make this happen, open the reverse lookup zone and right click it and click new zone. Click next. Make sure the primary zone is selected and click next. We don't need to change anything here. We can continue. Make sure IP version for reverse lookup zone is selected and click next. Here, type the first 3 octet in your IP address. In my case, 172 1610. Click Next. We want to secure dynamic update, so this option is okay for us. Let's click Next and click Finish. When you open the reverse lookup zone, you will see the reverse of the IP address starts with 10.16.172 in my case, which is fine for us. When we create a new DNS name, we can easily select create associated PTR record under the reverse lookup zone as well. Right now, let's skip it and close the DNS manager. Next part, we are going to optimize our configurations. To do that, we prepared a PowerShell script here. You can copy it our website easily if you want. What does it do? It makes 3 configurations. One of them is enabling the recycle bin feature. What does it do? Normally, when you delete the Active Directory objects accidentally, you have to restore the objects from backups. But in this case, the system can hold them for 180 days. And the second one is the DNS locking. DNS locking mechanism needs to be done only for the primary domain controller, which is installed in your first domain controller when there is no additional domain controllers in your environment. Why are we doing this? Let's go to the control panel first and check the network settings and see what has happened after the domain controller installation. Click the Network and Sharing Center, click Change Adapter Settings, double-click the Network Interface card, click Properties and IP version 4. As you may remember, we specified the preferred DNS name, just the IP address of this server, and loopback IP address as the alternate DNS server. But after that, the system changed itself automatically. And to prevent these configurations happening and keeping it stable, we configured it to get the most accurate one for your primary DNS server. But in your case, when there is another domain controller in your environment, the previous suggestions still applies, and you need to make sure that the preferred DNS servers should be point to the other domain controllers, which is cross-mapping. Let's close it and close these network sharing centers. Let's click a new folder here, call it temp or whatever you like, and create a text document here. By the way, the third configuration will be the time configuration. The time is very important for the Active Directories. We can call it the heart of the Active Directory. The Kerberos, which is the authentication method of the Active Directory, relies heavily on time. So when there are computers not synced with Active Directory more than 5 minutes, for example, they cannot log in. So this operation should be precise and smooth when they communicate with the Active Directory. So with this script, we are going to set the NTP configuration to global pool.ntp.org servers instead of relying on hardware clocks. Let's call this script as AD optimization. And since we are going to change its extension, let's see the extensions from here and change it to PowerShell script. Open it and let's paste it here. Click Save. Let's open PowerShell with admin rights. Let's go back to the directory path and run this script. The script finished successfully. As you can see, we can see these 3 settings are applied without any problems. So let's check one of them. For example, the DNS configuration. It says it is set to 172.16.10.10 to see if it is configured accordingly. Let's check it here again. Yes, it is configured just fine. You can use this script to make these configurations if needed in your end. Let's close these windows and clear this screen. The other configuration will be the activating the 32K database architecture. This is the biggest feature of Server 2025. Maybe for years the Active Directory database ran on an 8K page size. We will use a command to change the size to 32K architecture. This provides an incredible performance boost for large objects and high scale environments. But be careful. This is an irreversible process and you need to make sure it is necessary in your end. Once enabled, you cannot restore using an old 8K format backups. And also your backup software should support 32K architecture before validating this. To configure it, let's select our command and paste it here. Let's click enter. And our final configurations will be the checkings of these setup. So after this configuration, we need to make sure everything is okay and runs smoothly. So in PowerShell or command prompt, let's clear here. We are going to run some commands to test DNS first. Type dcdiag /test DNS. The test results are here and it says the adtechuptic.com passed test DNS. But there are some failures as you can see. These are the root domains and since we haven't configured our environment to reach them, these errors are acceptable and can be ignored. As for the second check, let's clear the screen. We can type netdom query FISMO. Active Directory has some roles on it, like Schema Master, Domain Naming Master, PDC, Read Pool Manager, and so on. So these roles by default are installed on the first domain controller, but according to needs, they can be relocated, and some of them also shared and used by the other domain controllers. Since we see these configurations and the 5 roles here, there is no problem. Our system is ready for the production. However, I want to give some suggestions. A single domain controller is never enough for an enterprise environment. It should be backed up by the additional domain controller as soon as possible to ensure failover. And one of the golden rules is that in a virtualized environment, never attempt to revert your Active Directory servers using snapshots. If you do this in any of them, it can break your architecture entirely. Always use proper backup tools like system state backups when it is needed. I believe this is the end of this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next time. Bye.